Hi, welcome to our Executive Master's course on this idea of leveraging MarTech, AdTech, and ComTech to drive sustainable business growth. It's an exciting topic for me. Technology is, not my first choice, maybe like a lot of you, but it's essential that we know it. And essentially, we stay on top of it. So I think the best way to begin a course like this is to kind of give you some context. So we're going to look at the historical development of this in a short little tour. The rest of this course will be 12 weeks of scintillating excitement that will hardly contain your ability to sit still. Okay, maybe not, but at least we'll have fun doing it. When we meet in person, that'll be a good opportunity for us to feed back and to understand the kinds of things that are going on. We'll do some fun stuff. But right now, we're in the video session, and this will be prepared for you each week so that you have something to kind of help to prepare your live sessions. So let's begin with the idea of the history of MarTech and where that's all coming from. So when we begin any discussion about marketing, we really have to begin with the customer, right? I mean, that's the one that pays the bills. Way back 87, maybe 80 years ago, the salespeople of the world came up with this idea of a funnel, a way to move their prospects through to the bottom so that they could make a purchase. That was the idea. And the idea was to break it down in steps so that we had a progression. Now, oftentimes, it's not linear, right? Things go iteratively. They move back and forth, and that's something we have to keep in mind. But this funnel served a pretty good purpose, and it also led something we use today pretty commonly, and that's the consumer journey. So in this primer on marketing, we would be silly if we didn't start with the most important thing, and that is awareness. As a matter of fact, it was so important that awareness is all we focused on in a good part of the history of advertising. Awareness through ads. And when we try to get people aware of something, we always say, get your name out there. That's not really enough, because what we have to do is get our name out there associated with a benefit, with something the customer can see, so that they can put us in their consideration set. Consideration is what they're going to actually hope to solve their problem with. Once they get there, we hope that we get to conversion, a fancy title for basically making the sale. Now, those first three steps are what we would call in the get and keep area. Get and keep meaning marketing of getting and keeping customers. That's the first part, the getting. The second part begins with trying to make them more loyal, make them understand what our product's all about. That's keeping customers so that they actually become evangelists. And when they become evangelists, what we're really saying is, hey, they tout our product with their friends. And what better advertising, it's always been this, than word of mouth. Because it's trusting. People trust it and are willing to say something about a product. That means that they want their friends to enjoy what they're enjoying. So that's the consumer journey concept here. Now, as we move through the consumer journey and we bring our customer in the equation, there are touch points, digital touch points and physical touch points. Now, when we think about touch points, it becomes pretty clear that when the consumer comes through, what we would call this sequence here of awareness, consideration, conversion, getting customers, and then retention and loyalty, they come in touch with something basically called an earned touch point. The earned touch point is kind of like PR. People, we don't have control over that so much, but we do have the ability to influence. Now, that would be over on the far left there underneath the little consumers, that little pink or shaded area of a red called PR. And PR is really about unpaid kinds of messaging. People pay attention to it because we earn their attention. Whereas the managed touch point is really the one in which it might be TV, radio, and that sort of thing. What ads, we control those. We put them on the air as often as we want, as much money as we have, and where we want, and so forth. So when we think of those two divisions, it kind of breaks up the way that we approach things. And when we look at this chart, it gets pretty confusing. But we can kind of study this a little bit in your leisure and understand that, kind of map it on your mind. This is what a consumer may go through. and what we can do to actually influence that. Now, each one of those touch points is as a myriad of different kinds of applications or software or whatever you want to call it to be able to help us accomplish those tasks. Like they're above consideration. It says social media, YouTube, Instagram, X, TikTok, Facebook. Those are the social media that we often can buy ads on. They can be managed touch point, or they can actually be an earned touch point. We think more in social media of earned. When it becomes managed, it's more of a programmatic kind of an advertising thing. But anyway, that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at this idea of managing for millions, not just hundreds. Now, we like to think marketing is marketing to a person of one, an audience of one, but that's impractical. We're trying to reach thousands or millions of people. We need technology to expand that, to do it quickly. And it's a complex task. So let's try to work our way through the back half as well, and that is the retention and loyalty aspects. That kind of changes the progress a little bit as to how we make it. We're actually forming more of a relationship, and those are the kinds of things we do there. All in all, trying to get to the end of the tunnel here, and that is getting the consumer to love us and be with us forever, and we have a good relationship. So let's think about the defining key marketing terms. MarTech is about campaigns, about planning, executing, measuring, and optimizing. Those are the things we can do in the technology, all four of those aspects. We'll dig into that. And essentially what we're trying to do is to get the campaign or the marketing efforts to be effective. In ad tech, it's about paid ads. How do we actually get our ads on so that they are delivered in a very effective manner through programmatic or through paid channels, SEM, PPC, those sorts of things, as well as properly targeted. We're reaching the right audience with the right data, and that we're tracking it fairly, that the distribution is watched. On Comtech, it's all about internal and external, right? PR tools, social listening tools, reputation management, and stakeholder engagement. That is Comtech. Now, if we look at all three of those, no matter where you came from, maybe you've come from all three of those areas. I have. Over the course of my career, I've dabbled. I've actually more than dabbled. I've played very seriously in each one of those three areas. So when we grasp this, we can kind of get a better understanding of how we put these pieces together to make more sense, and the technology that comes along with it. And then we call that the stacks. The stacks are the means by which we are going to put our technology together to accomplish what we're attempting to do in marketing. So there are the three pillars of marketing, communication, technology. Now let's break that down a little bit from a developmental point of view. 40 years of technology developments and marketing communications began back in the 80s with the origins in database marketing. Now, what is that? Well, actually, it's called ARPANET, believe it or not. And yeah, guess what it was? It was email. Of course, email, because it was mass audience kind of a thing, but delivered individually. Still very effective way. Email is very effective, as much as it's an annoyance to most of us, but that's the way it is for a lot of advertising. And ARPANET was rudimentary, basic stuff, but it developed into more sophisticated platforms like MailChimp. And a lot of you will use MailChimp. I use MailChimp. It's a great way to manage contacts and manage the means by which you're reaching out to individuals. Then we move down to the 90s, and digital marketing platforms come in place. Web analytics, something called Google. Heard of that? They made this word algorithm famous, right? Algorithm is that mathematical means by which we can, manipulate stuff. And that's what Google does well. They work with search. That's a big change that occurred, when we were trying to reach people through a megaphone by yelling louder or longer or more frequently or whatever. But then search became how to become the object of their attention. And Google taught us through their web analytics and the things we can use there to become better woo factors, the ones that are going to bring people to us. That was a significant development. It continues to develop today. Now then we move on to this first CRM thing called ACT. What's CRM? You know what that is. It's customer relationship management. Really, first applications were in sales, most likely in most organizations, because it was a customer and they were individual contact points, and they were taking individual data that we could collect. The salespeople and service people and so forth could collect and put into a database. So that the system would then become something that we could turn to make some decisions, to make attempts to reach people, to give them the information, to get information. A very effective thing. One of the best ones, of course, is Salesforce. It's taken over the world in many ways. And it's expanded way beyond simply just being a sales contact piece. It has lots of information, lots of product information, lots of internal information. So Salesforce is just, by the way, when I use these icons, I'm giving you an example, because a lot of times when I talk to students or talk to clients, they say, well, give me an example. And that's kind of the way we think about that sometimes. So by 2006 to 2008, there's these marketing automation platforms that come into play, and one of those you might have used early on was Hootsuite. As a way to organize your tweets, organize your overall social media communications. And HubSpot then developed as really one of these really excellent kinds of automated platforms. And we use HubSpot today. It's a very good source of organizing and keeping track of and manipulating, if you will, the communication that we're trying to send to our customers. Now, the first marketing technology landscape was developed in 2011. Looks like this. What an eye chart. We'll look at that in a second. Why would somebody do that? Well, a very smart guy put that together to kind of give us a visual impression. I call it kind of a logo farm, with all these individual companies. But it gives us an idea of how that all comes together. Now, why? Because by 2025, our current present time, more than 14,000 solutions have been developed in the last 4 years. It's just exploded, and no doubt that AI was a significant part of that. But before that, these elements of the stack, if you will, started coming available, to the point that this is now 9,300% growth since 2011. So let's move on to this chart that I was talking about. That's kind of the idea that Scott Brinker was trying to reflect, is that this is broken into 3 general kinds of categories: external promotion, customer experience, and then marketing management. Look at that sometime in your leisure. By the way, I break these slides down into PDFs that you can access on Brightspace, and look at each one carefully. Take your time, and that's why I do it. So then we want to move on to the next step of this equation, and that is the rise of ad tech. It was bound to happen if we begin with our timeline there from left to right. The initial piece was in the mid-1990s with the first banner ads. Remember those? Still have them, basically. It's a rudimentary ad server that dished those up in front of us so that we could put an ad in front of somebody while they were surfing the web with their browser. And then the next thing we see is early 2000s, that the real change with search engines came about, as we mentioned before with Google, but other platforms where search became a very, very important element for marketers, and therefore it became a very, very important element for people developing software for marketers. By the way, I hope you're all familiar with the term SaaS, S-A-A-S, software as a service, because that's what a lot of this is. It's software that has become a service for us to manage advertising, to manage communications, to manage, of course, marketing overall. Then we go to circa 2009 with something called RTB, real-time bidding. Placing ads, if you've ever done it, it can be tedious. It can be very difficult. And then we go to digital marketing. It can become very facilitated through technology, right? So we see programmatic rise, programmatic buying and selling of ad inventory. And that, of course, led to, by the 2010s, this DSP, the demand side platforms, the people that were advertising, looking for places to put their ads ads to reach their customers, and the supply side, the content producers that were trying to send them as the ads out. They were negotiating basically through programmatic, where you set up a profile of what you're willing to pay and when you're willing to pay it and so forth. And the computers do the work. The algorithms do the work. That leads to this data management platform. Now, all of this technology is what we have to use to navigate our way through to successful marketing, right? So in the scheme of things, back in 2007, when I got my first iPhone at the end of that year, I think it was, the mobile, and that was when the iPhone came out about that time. Mobile advertising exploded. Prior to that, we had this wonderful thing that everybody was hooked on called the Crackberry. It was called it was a Blackberry, but people called it Crackberry because it was like being on crack. They couldn't get it down. People just lived with those things. And that all was just words. That's all it was. By the smartphone, iPhone era, it became visuals, it became videos, it became a whole new expression of exploding on the senses, so to speak. YouTube gave rise to YouTube and things like that. And then also a little about that same time, social media platforms developed, very sophisticated networks. If you look at Facebook, you'd say, is that a sophisticated network? Well, it's a big one. And it also has lots and lots of things in it that we'll discuss that, are problematic and also great opportunities. So. Now we talk about the emergence of Comtech. Now, this is fraught with these, the farm, so to speak, the logo farm. But essentially, we begin by the late 1990s. And before that, really, the press release distribution and media monitoring stuff was pretty popular. They put out these clipping books, where show where your PR efforts showed up in the media. PR Newswire is one of the original ones. It goes back to the 60s. And then we saw something like Muck Rack and Cision come forward. And they were a little more sophisticated, dealing more with digital information. And then on top of that, something called Meltwater, which if you look at Meltwater today, it's a fantastic source of information from a comm point of view. And when we talk about comms, we're talking about public relations and internal communications primarily. And then we get to this whole idea that what we have here is crisis management platforms, and we have stakeholder management platforms, and we have comprehensive overall media platforms. And now, if you look at stakeholder platforms, things like Simply Stakeholders or Borealis or DARS, those are things that we might use if, in fact, we were corporate communicators trying to understand whether or not our messages were arriving properly, or whether or not there was something brewing that we needed to know about, an early warning system. And then also in the area of this project management and tools like Asana and Slack, and then of course Zoom is also a good one. But those are the kinds of tools that also crop up, and you don't think of them necessarily as marketing tools, but they are, because they allow people to talk and communicate with one another. And then over on the far right, we have a HubSpot and Salesforce emerging too as two very large, comprehensive kinds of platforms. Down below, there's something called Profit. PR, as you well know, is focused on the PR industry. We'll talk to a gentleman by the name of Aaron Quitkin, who had a PR agency called by the same name, and then started Profit and had a fascinating conversation. We'll report on that in the next week or so. So what we have here is a pretty clear understanding. By the way, the Arthur Page Society popularized this term Comtech as an equivalent response to the MarTech and AdTech. So Comtech's the third soldier in this group, and it all emanates from that original disparate tools evolved from this analog clipping service way back in the day that delivered, that led to the delivery of internet information and about distribution, about media monitoring, and about crisis management. That's really what we're talking about here. Now we enter the siloed era. For most of their history, these three technology domains really operated individually, kind of one-off tools. What they came about was because somebody in the PR or advertising or marketing area just said, hey, I need something to help me do this or that or the other. And a developer, an entrepreneur came up with the idea and delivered it. minimal integration. As a matter of fact, to some degree, there's some argument that says with AI, we're back to that whole idea that it's just about hand tools that we can use on our web, on our iPhones, and there's some discussion around that, and some legitimate discussion that is not necessarily about integration. By the way, when we talk about these tools, individual tools, or agentics now is becoming a very popular kind of thing. Those are very efficient, very good at what they do, and they're very stealth. They can move quickly, they can adjust and rapidly, and really provide us the kinds of information and ability to manage things that maybe the more integrated, fully armed kinds of operations can't. But in MarTech, we're focused on channels and existing customer relationships. In AdTech, it's concentrated on acquiring new customers through paid media. And then ComTech is really addresses the broader stakeholder communications and reputation. So when we break that down, we end up with challenges. The biggest challenge is trying to understand how do we do all those touch points? How do we manage all that whole consumer journey kind of a thing? Well, four things come to the fore. One of them is that data silos actually prevented a unified view of this customer journey. Data silo, what I was just talking about, MarTech, AdTech, ComTech, being siloed. That really prevented this harder, made it harder for us to see or manage the overall picture. Second thing that happened is that messaging and experiences often lack consistency across the touch points. So we think about the fact that we want to be able to have that consumer have a consistent understanding of what we're trying to do at the right time, at the right place. And that when silos doesn't always give us that opportunity, because we know that consumers are not just affected by one of these silos. They aren't just looking at marketing information. They aren't just looking at ad. They aren't just looking at com. They are exposed to all three. Third component was this idea that attribution became complicated when campaigns span multiple systems. Attribution. How do I decide what caused them to act? That's what attribution is. And that got to be very difficult because you kind of sort out, was it what really caused this? Was it the first message that I got to them? Was it the last message? And so we'll get into that too. And then the fourth part is that teams worked in isolation. That's the biggest problem is that MarTech and AdTech and ComTech teams were actually working in isolation, and that we miss the synergy operations, where things actually start to gel. And when we think about that, it's really about examining exactly what a potential customer is seeing and what's causing them to act. And we have to have a very, quick, kind of like A/B testing, if you will. We talk about A/B testing where we test ads on the web to split them up and do it very inexpensively and very frequently compared to what we did back in the day. So we could actually test messages and refine messages and get them down to clear actions. So the seeds of convergence really, for the most of their history, these three technologies, operate independently. But what we're trying to do is get to understand how do we get to driving sustainable growth. Yes, that's the object of this course, right? So when we think about that, we're thinking about this: the rise of integrated customer data platforms, CDPs, the increasing focus on omni-channel customer experiences, the growing importance of first-party data. The fourth one is this idea that we need a consistent messaging across all touch points. And then the demands for better attribution and ROI measurement. That's what causes convergence to come together. Those five things we just talked about. So there we have it, and that's what we began with, understanding what these various elements are within examination of these three columns, if you will, or three silos, if you will, however you want to discuss this, but three areas, platforms. And what we're attempting to do now is to understand how do we get data sharing between those, and how do we create some impact analysis? How do we understand what's actually moving the needle? And it's wrapped up into a package. It's as we say at the bottom there, integrated communications. That's all about convergence. all of it coming together. And that's what we'll talk about in coming weeks and trying to understand what does that mean. So in conclusion, just to wrap this up, the separate evolution of MarTech, AdTech, and communications, ComTech, created robust but isolated technology ecosystems. Each had distinct capabilities, methodologies, business models, all designed basically to solve specific communication challenges. And understanding that history that we just kind of walked you through a little bit gave us some perspective. It's essential that we can now explore the convergence and integration in the modern landscape. So in our next video, we'll examine the technological drivers of convergence, the challenges of integration, and then finally, how leading organizations are creating unified technology stacks across these domains. Pleasure being with you. See you soon.